Good evening, I'm Laura Shack. Welcome to the premiere of In Depth, a show where we dig beneath the headlines and examine new angles of the stories that matter to you. Tonight we'll be looking into the very real possibility of a terror threat on home soil. The rise of the Islamic State, or IS, has arguably been one of the most significant stories this year, not only because of the extremists' mass executions, but also because of the hundreds of foreign citizens joining the cause. Tonight we will look deeper into the process of radicalisation, why so many young people are joining IS, and how social media and imagery play a key part in the Islamic State's plans to spread their power. With me now is David Cook, a security science lecturer and a member of the ECU Security Research Institute. Thank you for joining me, David.
My pleasure, Laura.
So let's get started with, how real is this threat to Australia from Australian-born Muslims that have been radicalised by IS?
The threat's definitely real because there are many people who are drawn to the cause, and we have to remember that the cause is not specifically just about Muslims who are drawn to the more sensationalised beheadings and violence that we talk about. It's really also about the cause about wanting to help their expatriate people from Syria, from their motherlands, from places where they previously had brothers, cousins and family. So it goes deeper than just simply about violence.
Sure, and what are the methods IS is using to seduce these Muslims into joining their cause?
Well, I guess the most concerning types of recruitment come through social media, and when we think of those social media we often think about Facebook, but in reality probably the main methods or the main pathways are through some of the other fringe methods. So Twitter is very popular and Tumblr. Now those two are particularly useful because they're not moderated. If you put something like a picture of a beheading on Facebook, it'll get torn down within 30 minutes. If you put it up on Tumblr, it could stay out for days or weeks.
Oh, wow, I did not know that. Let's talk about the imagery now. So they do tend to use imagery like these beheadings. How does that more violent, gory imagery inspire these people to join?
Well, you have to remember that recruitment is a two-stage process. When people become radicalised, they often don't realise that they've been radicalised. In fact, if you got together all of the worst terrorists in one room and called them terrorists, they would look at you strangely and say, we don't think that we're terrorists, we think that we're following a cause. But the system of showing people beheadings is a very common way to see if someone has got what it takes to take part in violence. So often a recruitment system is to show someone pictures of a live beheading and see their reaction, and that's one way in working out whether they're likely to fall into line with the cause or whether they like to look at things from the sidelines.
So those beheadings would work in like a second stage of a recruitment, but they wouldn't necessarily attract people who haven't got to that stage yet?
Well, there are obviously some people who are drawn to the theatre of war, and so to some people that might be part of it, but the more violent imagery that we associate with IS is a particular second stage recruitment strategy, yes.
Sure, so the controversial Parliament House burqa ban has just been dumped, but those wearing one will have to remove it when they're entering. Recently, I took to the streets to see how people view the traditional Islamic covering. Let's take a look.
I believe people should be able to wear what they want in Australia as it's a free country.
I don't have a problem with it because it's not my culture. If it's someone else's culture, that's fine. But it's not like anything to do with me, so.
We really need to have a long, hard look at our society in this day and age and say, well, why are women still feeling the need to cover themselves up? Like, we have to be asking ourselves why.
I just don't think they need to be. It's part of their religion, so let it be.
I personally have no issue with it. Like, if it's their cultural value to wear that, go for it.
You never know, terrorists might try and use that and carry weapons under it. It's too big, it's only can see your eyes, it's like you can't see what they've got underneath it or anything. You never know.
No, I think it's terrible. I think when you're in a country like this, I think we should all dress as such. That's my personal opinion. Well, you can't even see their faces, can you?
I feel sorry for the women that they feel the need to have to wear it.
But you should be able to see a person's face,
Yeah.
Yeah. If the law says you're not allowed to carry it, fair enough.
No, absolutely not. I think that's the opposite of thing that people should be doing.
Too easy for a man to walk into Parliament House with a machine gun.
What is it going to solve? Like, it's not really going to solve there's like a division between our cultures. It's not going to solve that. It's going to put actually more pressure on the other culture to feel as if like they need to speak out and they need to respond with violence and force.
What did you think of those? Any surprises?
Not really. I suppose the general population will always be divided on the opinions about the burqa. There's two things I guess that are important to mention. Firstly, from a security point of view, one of the ladies said she was worried about people carrying in a machine gun underneath a burqa and so on. Well, Parliament House has very adequate security measures in terms of metal detection, weapon detection that go beyond having to actually get someone to show their face. So we should probably separate out those two issues. But I think the other aspect is that we hear people in general talk about the confronting nature of the burqa. But if we were to get a person, a typical Muslim woman in a burqa, and put her side by side with, say, a member of a bikie gang, and ask them which was more confronting, they might actually say that the bikie was far more confronting. They would look heavily armed and dangerous. People who are in burqas are terribly passive by comparison. It's the risk and the threat and the unknown which drives this, and that's what drives the fear.
Do you think, though, that it's possible that this debate around the burqa could actually increase the feelings of hostility amongst Australian Muslims?
Well, I think it already does. I think that we've seen that in some of the protests and things that have taken place. Some recent protests where we've seen people trying to disrupt people, Australians trying to disrupt other people who want to get on their business and wear their burqa. And I think that to some extent we need to separate security out from safety. So if people come into the airport and they need to be identified to see if they match with a passport, then they can be taken into a side room and we can identify those people.
Sure.
But in the common, in the streets where people walk, people should be allowed to get on with their business.
Does IS employ a grooming process with its recruits?
It's a very good question, and we don't know quite enough about all of the way in which IS works, but what we do know is that they have a very good social media group, it's almost like a Hollywood-style marketing group, I suppose. They have an online magazine called Dabiq. Dabiq is very well written. It's written in English, it's not written in Arabic, and it seems to be directly targeted at people who are from Western countries, so Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America and the UK.
And excuse my ignorance, but do you know what Dabiq is translated to?
No, I'm not quite sure what Dabiq. I think it's an acronym for something actually,
okay.
DABIQ. But it's modelled on the previous Inspire magazine, which was around back in 2011 when we were on the hunt for Osama bin Laden, when they realised that they were reaching out to people in terms of getting them to align with solid imagery, being able to see people who are in terms of the Syrian conflict, who are in fear, and combining that with the need for violent extremism.
And why do you think it's mainly young people that have felt the need to join IS?
Well, I'm not convinced that it is just young people, but you're right in that social media attracts young people more than old people. And the kinds of social media we're talking about, so Twitter and Tumblr, the average 50-year-old, 60-year-old person's probably not drawn to that kind of communication. This is fast, it's quick, it's popular, people can share it, and the message can be diffused very quickly. So I think it's always going to attract those people who are likely to take on board new forms of communication such as Twitter and Tumblr.
Do you know if the Islamic State actively searches for people to recruit, or is it mainly Muslims reaching out and trying to connect with them?
Again, we don't know all of the facts about IS, but what we do know is that what they show in terms of their social media is well organised, and so that does suggest that it is a method of reaching out to people. Because it's not simply one person's random tweet or another person's random message or a random picture, but a highly organised set of imagery that flows out. I think we can make the assumption that they are well organised and this is a method for recruitment.
And I suppose this is a more personal question, but do you think there's something missing or lacking in our society that is leading these people to sort of, I guess, be more open to IS?
Look, there's quite a bit of academic work that suggests that if people don't connect with the society in which they live in, they'll look to connect somewhere else. And so to some extent, if people live in what might be a displaced environment where they feel a yearning for their motherland, or they feel a yearning, in some cases it's for the Muslim religion, part of that connectivity is driven both by religion, by a longing for something, the grass is greener somewhere else. And so I think that's always going to be the case. People are always going to want something somewhere else. In this case, it might be young people in Australia who are feeling a little bit displaced and looking for something better.
Well, that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you for your insight, David.
My pleasure, Laura.
Join me next week as we talk to an expert whose research suggests cannabis can be used to fight the deadly Ebola virus. Good night.